The sound of a heavy fist pounding on the door in the cold dawn light sent a shiver down Rosalie O'Connor's spine, a foreboding chill that had nothing to do with the cool spring air seeping through the cracks of their modest homestead on the outskirts of Sweetwater Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1876. "Samuel, please," Rosalie whispered, clutching her brother's arm as he lurched toward the door. "Don't do this. There must be another way." Samuel O'Connor shook off her grip, his bloodshot eyes refusing to meet hers. The past 3 months since their parents' death had transformed her once kind-hearted brother into a man she barely recognized, a man consumed by whiskey, gambling debts, and desperation. "There ain't no other way, Rosie," he muttered, his breath sour with last night's drink. "Fletcher and his boys won't wait any longer. It's this, or they'll take everything, the land, what's left of the livestock. Maybe even our lives. But selling me like cattle?" Her voice broke on the last word. Samuel's face hardened. "It's not selling. It's a marriage arrangement. Old man Greeley's offering to clear my debt in exchange. You'll have food, shelter. It's more than I can give you now." Before Rosalie could protest further, Samuel yanked open the door. 3 men stood on their porch: Thaddeus Fletcher, the territory's most notorious moneylender, flanked by 2 bruisers whose hands rested casually on their holstered pistols. Behind them, hunched in a wagon, sat Ezekiel Greeley, a man of 60 whose 3 previous wives had all perished under mysterious circumstances. "Time's up, O'Connor," Fletcher announced, his voice carrying the casual cruelty of a man accustomed to collecting his due by any means necessary. "You got my money, or we taking what's owed another way?" Samuel pushed Rosalie forward. "The arrangement with Greeley still stands?" Fletcher's thin lips curved into what might have passed for a smile, if not for the coldness in his eyes. "Old Zeke here's being mighty generous, taking damaged goods for the full 2,000 you owe." "I'm not damaged goods," Rosalie said through clenched teeth, though she knew what Fletcher meant. At 22, she was considered a spinster in these parts, too old and too opinionated for most men seeking a bride. Greeley's rheumy eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "You'll do," he grunted. "Get in the wagon, girl. We'll be at the preacher's by noon." "I need to get my things." "No need," Greeley interrupted. "Got everything a wife requires at my place." 20 miles away, as the morning sun cast long shadows across the rolling grassland, Holt Montgomery stood at the edge of his property, surveying the cattle grazing peacefully on the lush spring grass. At 30, he had accomplished what most men only dreamed of, turning a small inheritance into the most prosperous ranch in the territory through nothing but hard work and determination. "Beautiful morning, ain't it, boss?" said Caleb, his foreman, riding up beside him. Holt nodded, breathing in the clean air. "That it is." Mail came. "Got something from that lawyer in Cheyenne." Caleb handed over an official-looking envelope. Holt tore it open, his expression darkening as he read. "Railroad's making another offer for the land. How much this time?" "Double what they offered last month." Holt folded the letter carefully. "Still not selling." Caleb whistled. "That's a fortune you're turning down." "This land isn't about money," Holt replied, his gaze sweeping over the rolling hills and valleys of the Montgomery Ranch. "My father died building this place. I won't see it carved up for rail ties and coal smoke." They rode back toward the main house, passing ranch hands already busy with the day's work. Holt had built a good life here, respected by his men, successful in his endeavors. Only in the quiet of night did he acknowledge the emptiness that sometimes settled in his chest, the longing for someone to share it with. The sound of approaching horses drew their attention as they neared the ranch house. 2 riders appeared, pushing their mounts hard. "That's young Billy Thompson," Caleb said, shading his eyes. "And looks like Nate Jenkins with him." Holt frowned. Billy worked for the mercantile in town, and Nate was a hand at the O'Connor place, or what was left of it, since Jonathan and Mary O'Connor had died in that influenza outbreak last winter. Mr. Montgomery, Billy called, reining in his lathered horse. Thank the Lord we found you. What's happened? Holt asked, dismounting. Nate Jenkins, his face flushed from hard riding, blurted out, It's Samuel O'Connor, sir. He's sold his sister to settle a gambling debt with Fletcher. Holt stiffened. What do you mean, sold his sister? To Ezekiel Greeley, Billy added, disgust evident in his young voice. They're taking Miss Rosalie to the preacher right now to be married. We thought. Well, everyone knows you and Fletcher have history, and Miss Rosalie deserves better than Greeley. Holt's jaw tightened. Thaddeus Fletcher had driven Holt's closest friend to suicide 3 years earlier over an inflated debt. As for Ezekiel Greeley, the thought of Rosalie O'Connor in that man's hands made his blood run cold. He'd known Rosalie since she was a girl, had watched her grow into a determined young woman who kept her family's small farm running even as her brother squandered what little money they had. Their paths crossed occasionally in town enough for him to notice her quiet dignity and the spark of intelligence in her green eyes. Enough for him to respect her. Caleb, saddle fresh thunder, Holt ordered, already striding toward the barn. And get my good coat. What are you aiming to do? Caleb called after him. Holt paused, his expression grim. Whatever I have to. Rosalie sat rigid on the hard wagon bench, fighting back tears of rage and humiliation as Greeley's wagon rumbled down the dusty road toward town. Fletcher and his men rode ahead, while Samuel followed behind, his shoulders slumped in defeat or shame, she couldn't tell which, and found she didn't care. The brother who had promised their dying parents he would look after her had betrayed her in the most fundamental way. He had sold her, his own flesh and blood, to clear a debt. The knowledge burned like acid in her chest. You'll give me sons, Greeley announced suddenly, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. My other wives couldn't manage it. You look strong enough. Rosalie said nothing, bile rising in her throat. When I'm done with you, you'll talk when spoken to, he continued, irritation creeping into his voice. I don't abide willful women. Her fingers curled into fists in her lap. If she had a knife, she'd— Riders coming, one of Fletcher's men called out. Rosalie looked up to see a cloud of dust approaching rapidly from the east. As it drew closer, she made out 3 horsemen riding hard toward their small procession. Fletcher and his men drew their weapons as the riders approached. The lead rider on a powerful black stallion slowed to a trot, and Rosalie felt a surge of recognition. Holt Montgomery. She had always been aware of him, his commanding presence, his quiet authority. They'd exchanged pleasantries at church socials and market days, nothing more. But now, seeing him approach with purpose in every line of his body, something flickered in her chest that felt dangerously like hope. This doesn't concern you, Montgomery, Fletcher called out as Holt and his men drew up alongside the wagon. Keep riding. Holt ignored him, his gaze finding Rosalie. Miss O'Connor, are you all right? Before she could answer, Greeley's arm shot out, gripping her wrist painfully. She's spoken for. This is a private matter. A woman being bartered to settle a debt is hardly private, Holt replied, his voice level but with an undercurrent of steel. Especially when that debt might not even be legitimate. Fletcher's face darkened. You calling me a liar, Montgomery? I'm calling you a thief and a swindler, Holt said calmly. Just like you were when you drove Jack Thornton to put a bullet in his head rather than face the shame of losing his family home to your falsified ledgers. You can't prove nothing about Thornton, Fletcher snarled, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Maybe not, but I can offer an alternative. Holt reached inside his coat and withdrew a folded document. I have here a bank draft for $2,000, the amount Samuel O'Connor supposedly owes. I'm prepared to settle his debt, provided Miss O'Connor is released from any obligation to Mr. Greeley. Rosalie's breath caught in her throat. $2,000 was a fortune, more than most men saw in a lifetime. Now, why would you do that? Fletcher asked suspiciously. My reasons are my own, Holt replied. Do we have a deal? Fletcher's eyes narrowed calculatingly. 3,000. That's my final offer. Without hesitation, Holt reached into his pocket again and produced another bank draft. Done. Greeley lurched to his feet in the wagon, his face mottled with rage. She's mine by agreement. You can't just. The agreement was for debt settlement. Fletcher cut in smoothly, his greedy eyes fixed on the bank drafts in Holt's hand. Mr. Montgomery's offering a better deal. This is robbery. Greeley spat. This is business, Fletcher corrected, extending his hand for the drafts. Nothing personal, Zeke. Holt held the papers just out of reach. Miss O'Connor comes with me first. Then you get paid. For a tense moment, no one moved. Fletcher's men kept their hands near their guns, while Holt's companions shifted, ready for trouble. Finally, Fletcher nodded. Jenkins, help the lady down from that wagon. Nate, one of Holt's companions, quickly dismounted and approached the wagon, offering his hand to Rosalie. Her legs trembled as she stood, hardly daring to believe this sudden turn of events. As she moved to step down, Greeley's hand shot out again, grabbing her arm. I paid for a wife, he growled. Take your hand off her, Holt said quietly, but there was something in his voice that made even Fletcher's men straighten. Greeley hesitated, then released her with a curse. Once Rosalie was safely mounted behind Nate, Holt handed over the bank drafts. Fletcher examined them carefully before tucking them inside his vest. Pleasure doing business, he said with a mocking tip of his hat. Samuel, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Rosie, I don't, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Don't you dare speak to me. Without another word, Holt turned his horse and led their small party away, leaving Samuel, Fletcher, and a fuming Greeley behind in a cloud of dust. They rode in silence for several miles, taking a route that led away from town. Rosalie's mind whirled with questions, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. The enormity of what had just happened, what had almost happened, left her numb. Finally, Holt slowed his pace, allowing his horse to fall back beside Nate's mount. Are you all right, Miss O'Connor? He asked, genuine concern evident in his deep voice. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Why would you do this? $3,000. Money's just money, he said simply. Not to most people, she countered. That's a fortune. And for a stranger, we're not strangers, he interrupted gently. I've known your family for years. Your father was a good man. He wouldn't have wanted this for you. Tears threatened again at the mention of her father. No, he wouldn't have, she agreed softly. But I can never repay such a sum. I'm not asking for repayment. Then what are you asking for? She couldn't keep the suspicion from her voice. Recent events had shaken her faith in humanity. Holt seemed to understand. Nothing you're not willing to give, Miss O'Connor. For now, I'm offering you sanctuary at my ranch until you decide what you want to do next. My housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, will ensure all proprieties are observed. Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by shame at having doubted his intentions. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. I don't know how I'll ever repay such kindness. His smile was brief, but genuine. Call me Holt. And let's not worry about repayment just yet. The Montgomery ranch sprawled across a beautiful valley, far larger and more prosperous than Rosalie had imagined. A large two-story house of solid timber construction dominated the property, surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings, corrals, and bunkhouses. Dozens of hands were visible, working with cattle and horses. As they approached, a stout, gray-haired woman emerged from the main house, wiping her hands on her apron. Mrs. Abernathy, Holt called as they dismounted. We have a guest who'll be staying with us for a while. This is Miss Rosalie O'Connor. The housekeeper's shrewd eyes took in Rosalie's disheveled appearance and the men's grim expressions. I'll prepare the blue room, she said without missing a beat. Miss O'Connor looks like she could use a hot bath and a good meal. Thank you, Rosalie said fervently, suddenly aware of how bedraggled she must appear after the morning's ordeal. Mrs. Abernathy took charge, ushering Rosalie into the house with a motherly arm around her shoulders. You come with me, dear. Whatever's happened, you're safe now. Rosalie looked back over her shoulder to see Holt watching them, his expression unreadable. For the first time since the pounding on her door that morning, she felt something other than fear and despair. It might have been gratitude, or relief, or something else entirely, something she wasn't ready to name. Hours later, bathed and dressed in a borrowed nightgown and robe, her hair still damp from washing, Rosalie sat before the fire in her assigned bedroom. Mrs. Abernathy had brought up a tray with soup, fresh bread, and tea, insisting she eat before resting. A soft knock at the door made her look up. Come in, she called, expecting the housekeeper. Instead, Holt entered, remaining respectfully by the door. He had changed from his riding clothes into clean trousers and a white shirt, his dark hair still damp from his own washing. I wanted to check that you have everything you need, he said. Mrs. Abernathy has been very kind, Rosalie replied. The bath was heavenly after everything. He nodded, his eyes warm with understanding. I've sent word to Sheriff Bennett about Fletcher's activities. He's been looking for a reason to run that snake out of the territory for years. And my brother? The question escaped before she could stop it. Holt's expression softened. I don't know, Rosalie. That's up to you. If you want to see him, no, she said quickly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I understand. He hesitated. There's something else you should know. When I paid Fletcher, I also purchased your family's deed. Rosalie stiffened. Our land. It's yours, he clarified. I've had my lawyer draw up papers transferring ownership solely to you. Samuel will have no claim to it. She stared at him, stunned. Why would you do that? Holt shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. It seemed like the right thing to do. The right thing, she echoed, overwhelmed. Mr. Montgomery, Holt, I don't know what to say. First you save me from a fate worse than death, then you secure my future. All without asking for anything in return. I've never encountered such generosity. Perhaps you haven't been around the right kind of men, he suggested quietly. Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a possibility. I should let you rest, he said, breaking the moment. We can talk more tomorrow, when you're feeling stronger. After he left, Rosalie sat for a long time gazing into the fire, trying to make sense of the day's events and the tall, enigmatic man who had irrevocably changed her life. Over the following weeks, Rosalie found herself settling into life at the Montgomery ranch with surprising ease. Mrs. Abernathy took her under wing, treating her like the daughter she'd never had. The ranch hands were respectful, even protective once word spread of her ordeal. And then there was Holt. He was often busy with the demanding work of running such a large operation, but he made time each day to check on her welfare. Their conversations, initially awkward and brief, gradually lengthened and deepened. She discovered his dry wit, his passionate knowledge of literature, his unwavering sense of justice. One evening in late May, as sunset painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Rosalie found Holt on the front porch, a book open in his lap. Tennyson? She asked, recognizing the volume. He smiled, pleasantly surprised. You know his work? My mother taught literature before she married, Rosalie explained, sitting in the rocker beside him. We had quite a library at home. I'd like to see it someday, he said. Then, more carefully, have you given any thought to what you'll do about your family's property? Rosalie sighed, looking out over the peaceful ranch. I should go back, I know. It's my home, my inheritance. But the thought of being there alone. You wouldn't have to be alone, Holt said. I could arrange for a couple to work as hands and housekeepers. The Jenkins would jump at the chance, I think. You've thought about this, she observed. I've thought about many things lately, he admitted, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Before he could continue, a rider appeared on the road, approaching at speed. Holt stood, frowning. That's Ben Riley from town, he said, setting his book aside. The rider pulled up before the porch, his horse lathered from hard riding. Mr. Montgomery. Sheriff Bennett sent me. There's trouble in town. Fletcher and his boys have taken over the saloon, claiming you swindled them with fake bank drafts. They're threatening to burn the place down if you don't show. Holt's expression hardened. The drafts were legitimate. Fletcher knows that. Sheriff thinks Fletcher's been drinking, looking for an excuse to come after you. He's got Greeley with him too, ranting about stolen property. Rosalie paled. This is because of me. No, Holt said firmly. This is Fletcher's doing, not yours. He turned to Riley. Tell Bennett I'm coming. And get word to Caleb to gather some of the hands. After Riley rode off, Holt turned to Rosalie. Stay here with Mrs. Abernathy. I'll handle this. It's too dangerous, she protested. Fletcher's been waiting for an excuse to come after you since Jack Thornton died. If something happened to you because of me, nothing's going to happen, he assured her, though they both knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. As he moved to enter the house and prepare, Rosalie caught his arm. Holt, wait. He turned, and without giving herself time to think, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his in a brief, impulsive kiss. For luck, she whispered as she pulled away, her cheeks flushed. Surprise and something deeper flickered in his eyes. I'll be back, he promised, his voice husky. Within the hour, Holt rode out with Caleb and 10 of his most trusted hands, all armed and grim-faced. The endless hours of waiting that followed were the hardest Rosalie had ever endured. She paced the length of the parlor countless times, deaf to Mrs. Abernathy's attempts at distraction or comfort. He'll be fine, child, the housekeeper insisted. Mr. Montgomery can handle himself, and he's got good men with him. Fletcher is dangerous, Rosalie replied. And this is my fault. I should never have what? Avoided being sold like cattle? Found refuge with a good man. Mrs. Abernathy shook her head firmly. None of this is your doing. Dawn was breaking when they finally heard hoofbeats approaching. Rosalie rushed to the door, her heart in her throat. Caleb rode in first, followed by the others. Last came Holt, his face grim but intact. No blood, no obvious injuries. Relief made Rosalie's knees weak. What happened? She asked as he dismounted stiffly. Fletcher won't be troubling anyone again, he said simply. Did you? She couldn't finish the question. Kill him?
No.
But he drew on the sheriff. Holt's expression was somber. Bennett had no choice. And Greeley? Heading east on the morning stage, if he knows what's good for him. Holt hesitated. There's something else. Your brother was there. Rosalie tensed. Samuel? He tried to stand up to Fletcher, told everyone how he'd been cheated. Holt's voice softened. He took a bullet meant for me. Is he? Fear clutched at her heart despite everything. He'll live, but it was close. He's at Doc Wilson's in town. He's been asking for you. Rosalie closed her eyes, a tangle of emotions warring within her: relief, anger, a stubborn remnant of familial love. I should see him, she said finally. I'll take you, Holt offered. But not today. We're both exhausted. He was right. Now that the immediate danger had passed, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She swayed slightly on her feet, and without comment, Holt swept her up into his arms. Mrs. Abernathy, he called. Miss O'Connor needs rest. I can walk, Rosalie protested weakly, even as her head settled against his shoulder. Indulge me, he murmured, carrying her up the stairs. The following day, They rode into town together. Sweetwater Creek was buzzing with gossip about the showdown at the saloon, and more than a few curious glances followed them as they made their way to the doctor's office. Samuel looked diminished in the narrow bed, his face gray with pain. When he saw Rosalie, tears filled his bloodshot eyes. "Rosie," he whispered, "I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," she admitted, remaining by the door. "I deserve that." He winced as he tried to shift position. "I deserve worse. What I did to you, there's no forgiveness for that." "No," she agreed. "There isn't." Samuel's gaze shifted to Holt, who stood protectively at Rosalie's side. "Montgomery, they said you took a bullet yesterday because of me." "Not because of you," Holt corrected. "Fletcher made his own choices." "Still." Samuel closed his eyes briefly. "Thank you for saving my sister. From Greeley and from me." Rosalie moved closer to the bed, her heart softening despite her resolve to remain cold. "Why, Samuel? How could you even think of such a thing?" "I wasn't thinking," he admitted. "The drink, the debts. Fletcher threatened to burn us out if I didn't pay. When Greeley made his offer, it seemed like the only way." Fresh tears leaked from his eyes. "I've been a coward and a fool. I failed you. I failed Ma and Pa." "Yes, you did," Rosalie said, but her voice had lost its edge. "But you tried to make it right in the end, taking that bullet." "Too little, too late." He reached for her hand. "Can you ever forgive me, Rosie?" She didn't answer immediately, her emotions too complex for simple words. Finally, she said, "I don't know, Samuel. Maybe someday, but not yet." He nodded, accepting her honesty. "I'm leaving as soon as Doc says I can travel. Heading to California. I won't trouble you again unless you want it." "Write to me when you're settled," she said after a moment. "Let me know you're all right." It was as much as she could offer, and they both knew it. Outside the doctor's office, Holt took her hand. "Are you all right?" "I will be," she said, surprised to find it was true. "He's still my brother, despite everything. But I need time." "Time heals many things," Holt agreed, helping her back onto her horse. As they rode out of town, Rosalie found herself looking at Holt with new eyes. In the weeks since he'd rescued her, she'd come to know him as a man of quiet strength, unwavering integrity, and unexpected tenderness. The flutter in her chest whenever he was near had grown into something deeper, something that both thrilled and terrified her. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her gaze. "That I need to make decisions about my future," she replied honestly. "I can't impose on your hospitality forever." "You're not imposing," he said firmly. "But I understand your need for independence." They rode in companionable silence for a while before he spoke again. "There's something I've been meaning to discuss with you, actually. A proposition of sorts."
À proposition.
She raised an eyebrow, curious. "Not that kind," he assured her quickly, a rare flush coloring his cheeks. "A business arrangement regarding your land." "Oh." She couldn't quite hide her disappointment. "Your property borders mine to the east," he continued. "It's good grazing land that would complement what I already have. I'd like to purchase it from you at a fair price, of course." Rosalie considered his offer. The money would give her freedom, options she hadn't had before. Yet the thought of leaving the area, of leaving him, created an unexpected ache in her chest. "I'll think about it," she promised. They crested a hill, and the full expanse of the Montgomery ranch spread out before them, golden in the afternoon light. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It is," he agreed, but when she glanced over, he was looking at her, not the landscape. Warmth bloomed in her cheeks under his steady gaze. "Holt. I'm not good with words like this," he said abruptly. "But these past weeks, having you at the ranch, getting to know you, it's changed things for me." Her heart quickened. "Changed things how?" "I used to think the ranch was enough. That I didn't need anything else to be content." He turned in his saddle to face her fully. "I was wrong. What are you saying? She asked, hardly daring to hope. I'm saying I don't want to buy your land as a business arrangement. I'm saying I'd rather join our properties together, the way I hope we might join our lives. His voice dropped. I'm asking if you might consider becoming my wife, Rosalie. She stared at him, momentarily speechless. I know it's sudden, he continued when she didn't immediately respond. And after what you've been through, the last thing you need is pressure about marriage. If you need time, or if the answer is no, yes, she interrupted, her voice stronger than she expected. He blinked. Yes, you need time? Yes, I'll marry you. A smile bloomed on her face, reflecting the joy suddenly bursting in her heart. I think I've been falling in love with you since the day you rode up to that wagon and saved me. The transformation of his expression from uncertainty to radiant happiness was something she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. Without another word, he dismounted and lifted her from her horse. Standing together on the hilltop overlooking what would be their combined lands, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. I love you, Rosalie O'Connor, he murmured against her lips. And I promise you'll never have to doubt your worth or your safety again. I love you too, she whispered back, amazed at how right the words felt, how natural. And I promise to be a partner worthy of all you've given up for me. He shook his head. I haven't given up anything that matters. I've only gained the most precious thing in the world. They were married 2 months later in the small white church in Sweetwater Creek. The whole town turned out for the occasion, partly from genuine affection for the couple and partly from lingering fascination with their dramatic story. Rosalie wore a gown of ivory satin that Mrs. Abernathy had helped her make, with her mother's lace veil carefully restored. Holt looked impossibly handsome in a new black suit, his face solemn until she appeared at the back of the church on Caleb's arm. Then his expression transformed into one of such naked adoration that whispers rippled through the congregation. Samuel was not present, having left for California as promised, but he'd sent a letter with his blessing and a small gold locket that had belonged to their mother. Rosalie wore it around her neck, a tangible connection to her past as she stepped into her future. You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Holt whispered when she reached his side at the altar. You're not so bad yourself, Cowboy, she whispered back, making him grin. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, an honest declaration of the love that had grown between them through extraordinary circumstances. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Holt's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the passion they would share in private. The celebration afterward at the Montgomery O'Connor Ranch lasted well into the night. Lanterns illuminated the yard where tables groaned with food and a band played lively tunes for dancing. Rosalie found herself passed from partner to partner as the ranch hands and townspeople all claimed to dance with the bride, until Holt finally reclaimed her with a mock growl of jealousy. I've been waiting all day to have you to myself, he murmured as they swayed together under the stars. We have the rest of our lives for that, she reminded him, though her own anticipation made her cheeks warm. Not soon enough, he replied, his eyes darkening with desire. They slipped away as the party continued, making their way to the main house where Mrs. Abernathy had prepared the master bedroom with fresh linens and flowers. The housekeeper herself had departed for her sisters in town, giving the newlyweds complete privacy. Standing in the bedroom that was now theirs, Rosalie felt a flutter of nerves despite her eagerness. Holt seemed to sense her hesitation. We have all the time in the world, he assured her, taking her hands in his. Nothing happens tonight that you don't want. I want everything with you, she said honestly. I'm just new to this. His smile was tender as he reached up to gently remove the pins from her hair, letting it cascade over her shoulders. Then we'll learn together. Their first night as husband and wife was a revelation, tender, passionate, and filled with discoveries that left them both breathless and amazed. Afterward, Lying in his arms as moonlight streamed through the window, Rosalie marveled at how completely her life had transformed in just a few short months. "What are you thinking?" Holt asked, trailing his fingers along her bare shoulder. "That I'm the luckiest woman alive," she replied, pressing a kiss to his chest, over his heart. "From the darkest day of my life to this perfect happiness. It doesn't seem real." "It's real," he assured her, tightening his arms around her. "And it's only the beginning." The years that followed proved him right. The combined Montgomery O'Connor ranch prospered beyond their expectations, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. They worked side by side, Rosalie proving herself as capable in business as she was in creating a warm and loving home. 3 years after their wedding, their family expanded with the birth of their daughter, Pearl, a spirited child with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes. 2 years later came their son, Patrick, whose mischievous nature kept everyone on their toes. Samuel wrote regularly from California, where he had found work with a shipping company and, eventually, sobriety and redemption. On Pearl's 5th birthday, he visited the ranch, bearing gifts and hesitant hopes for reconciliation. The siblings' reunion was tearful but healing, closing a painful chapter in both their lives. Through it all, the challenges of ranch life, the joys of parenthood, the inevitable sorrows and celebrations that mark any life, well lived, Holt and Rosalie's love only deepened. Each night, no matter how exhausted they might be, they took time to sit together on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in comfortable silence as they watched the sun set over their land. "Any regrets?" Holt asked on their 10th anniversary, as they sat in those same porch rockers, watching Pearl and Patrick chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Rosalie smiled, reaching for his hand. "Only that we didn't find each other sooner." "We found each other exactly when we were meant to," he countered, bringing her hand to his lips. "Not a moment too late, not a moment too soon." Watching their children's laughter, feeling the solid warmth of her husband's hand in hers, Rosalie knew he was right. Their love story had begun in darkness and desperation, but had blossomed into something far more beautiful than either could have imagined. The brother who had sold her to pay a debt, the cowboy who had given up a fortune to save her, these were now just the opening chapters of a tale still being written, day by day, in love and faith and abiding joy. "I love you, Holt Montgomery," she said, the words as fresh and true as the first time she'd spoken them on that hilltop years before. "And I love you, Rosalie Montgomery," he replied, his eyes reflecting the same wonder that she felt. "Forever and always." As twilight deepened into night and their children's laughter echoed across the ranch that was their kingdom and their legacy, Rosalie knew with absolute certainty that this love, this family, this life they had built together was everything she had ever wanted and more than she had ever dared to dream.